Alright, so for this video lesson, we're going to introduce chapter 8. This is circumference or radius or area of a circle. Okay, so we're going to get pretty familiar with calculating things related to either the area or the circumference or the diameter or the radius of a circle. Okay, so the ratio of the circumference to the diameter. So let's start off with some terminology, okay? So the outside of the circle is going to be the circumference. Okay, so the circumference is the outside of the circle. The diameter is going to be the length across the circle. And lastly, we're going to introduce radius. And radius is from the center point of the circle to the outside. Okay, so that is our radius. Okay, so we have the circumference. This is the outside of the circle. The diameter is the length across the circle. And the radius is halfway across the circle. So note that the radius is half of the diameter. Okay, so if you have the radius, you can calculate the diameter. Or if you have the diameter, you can calculate the radius. Okay, so the ratio of the circumference to the diameter, this is pretty close to 3. Okay, so we can say that the circumference is about 3 times the length of the diameter. Okay, so the ratio is a rounded number, and it actually represents a constant value called pi. Okay, not P-I-E, pi. This is math pi. And this is represented by the Greek letter or symbol that is pi. Okay, so if you push the pi calculator or the pi button on your calculator, you might get a value, and depending on the calculator that you have, pi is equal to 3.141592654 ... And this number will go on forever and ever and ever. Okay, there are actually global competitions to see who can remember and memorize the most amount of digits of pi. Okay, but for the sake of Math 7, we are just going to use 3.14 as our pi. Okay, so anytime that you see a pi, you can just do 3.14. Okay. Great. So if pi is equal to the circumference divided by the diameter, we can manipulate this equation here. Pi is equal to circumference divided by diameter. We can manipulate that to find the circumference of our circle. Okay, so to find the circumference of the circle, we just need to manipulate the pi is equal to circumference divided by the diameter formula. So we're trying to solve for circumference. So how are we going to get circumference all by itself? Well, currently circumference is being divided by diameter. So we will multiply by diameter to get rid of our denominator. And then we are left with circumference is equal to the diameter multiplied by pi. Okay? This is an important formula. So write this down somewhere. You need to know this. Okay, so yeah, that's our formula that we're going to use to calculate circumference of a circle, which is today's topic. Okay, so make sure you are familiar with this formula right here. All right, so let's get into an example here. So this is where we're going to use diameter to find circumference. Now remember, diameter is the whole length across the circle, okay? So first we're going to estimate the circumference of the circle. So for estimation, remember the ratio of circumference to diameter is pretty close to 3. So if you're estimating, and which is pi, which is approximately pi. So if you're estimating to find the circumference, you can just use pi as 3. Okay? So to calculate the circumference, and again, this is the total area, or sorry, the total distance outside of the circle, okay? So estimate the circumference. So our estimation so we know that the circumference is equal to the diameter multiplied by pi. Okay, so we know the diameter in this case is 5.2 meters. So if we're going to estimate that, our circumference, it is going to just be 3, which is fine because we're approximating this, right? It's an estimation, multiplied by 5.2 meters. Okay, if you multiply that by 5, that's okay too. This is just an estimation, right? So 3 times 5 is 15, and then 3 times 0.2 is 0.6. So our circumference is approximately 15.6 meters. Okay, now let's go ahead and calculate this. Okay, so area is or circumference is equal to diameter multiplied by pi. Our diameter is 5.2 meters, and when we multiply by pi, you can just use 3.14 in your calculator. Okay, you don't need to enter the pi button. You can just enter 3.14 instead. Okay. So if we multiply 5.2 by pi, this will give us 16.328 meters as our circumference. And we need to round this to the nearest tenth of a meter. So our 10th spot is right here. So we need to look beside it. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. It is a 2, so we'll leave it alone. So circumference to the nearest tenth is 16.3 meters. Okay, so we were pretty close to our estimation. Okay, so this would be like a quick way to check if you are indeed doing the calculation properly. All right, next example. We just did this one. 5.2. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead to the next one. Okay, so example 2. Estimate and calculate the circumference to the nearest tenth of a unit. So again, the circumference is the total area outside of a circle, and circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. Okay, we know the diameter is 40 millimeters. Okay, so for our estimation, we're just going to do pi, we're going to approximate that as 3, multiplied by our diameter, which is 40 millimeters. So our estimate will give us approximately 120 millimeters for our circumference. Okay, let's go ahead and actually calculate this time. Okay, so instead of my pi being 3, we're going to use 3.14. So C is equal to 3.14 multiplied by 40 millimeters. And we punch those into our calculator, and we will get a circumference equal to 125.6 millimeters. Okay, so again, pretty close with our estimation. So this could be a good, quick way just to make sure that you didn't enter something into your calculator incorrectly. Okay, moving on. Okay, so in this case, we are given the radius. Okay, so remember the radius. So the blue is going to be my circumference. Red will be my diameter. And green, remember, radius only goes from the middle of the circle to the edge of the circle. Okay? Now, remember that the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius, right? Our radius is half of the diameter, or our diameter is 2 times the length of the radius. So if we know our radius is 6.1 meter, if we multiply that by 2, we'll find our diameter is 12.2 meters. Okay? So this whole way across the circle is 12.2 meters. Okay, so we're going to estimate first. So estimate, we're using pi as 3, and this is just an approximation. That's what that little squiggly line means on top of that equal sign. Okay, so the circumference is approximately 3 times 12.2 meters. So the circumference is approximately 3 times 12 is 36. And 3 times 0.2 is 0.6. So 36.6 meters approximately for our circumference. Okay, let's go ahead and calculate this. So the only thing we're changing here is we're going to actually use 3.14 for pi. So C is equal to 3.14 multiplied by the diameter, which is 12.2 meters. And if we punch those into your calculator, you'll get a circumference of 38 and 308 thousandths of a meter. Okay, we want to round it to the nearest tenth. So our tenth is right here. To the right of that is the 0, so we're just going to leave that alone. So circumference is 38.3 meters. Okay, so again, pretty close to our estimation. Yeah, so when you're asked to estimate, you can just use pi as 3. When you are asked to calculate it, use pi as 3.14, please. Okay, so this is finding the circumference from the diameter or the radius. Okay. And that's it for topic 8.2. So your assignment for the remainder of today's class time is to complete the following practice problems on page 278. Once you are done these, please submit them to the Google Classroom. And as always, if you need help with anything, just reach out. I'd be happy to help you. All right, thank you, and we'll see you soon.